Hi class, I'm going to be teaching tonight on compassion fatigue, and it's something that I'm really passionate about. I did my dissertation on compassion fatigue and compassion satisfaction, so I really look forward to sharing some of the information with you. This is a really important topic, especially as we've talked most of the semester about helping clients with trauma. It's very important that we have very good self care for ourselves because it can be very difficult, very painful, and sometimes even cause symptoms of PTSD in ourselves as clinicians if we're not careful. So that's what I'm going to talk to you about in this recording. And I've uploaded two PowerPoints for you within course content so you can follow along with those as well. So when we're talking about self-care, it's very important for us as clinicians to have very good self-awareness. So asking ourselves routinely, how am I doing? Where am I at? Maybe even using the SUD scale, the standard units of distress, to assess ourselves and see, are my numbers low? Am I down at a 2 or 3 and doing fairly well? Or do I feel like my numbers are climbing and might be at risk for having some anxiety, some depression, some different symptoms like that. So it's very important that we routinely assess ourselves and that we're aware of, number one, our triggers that cause our own symptoms to increase, but also what are some signs that maybe we are not doing well. So take just a minute and think about your own body and physically and mentally, emotionally, spiritually. How do you know when you're not doing well? I know for myself, I clench my fists and I tend to keep my shoulders up at my ears. Not intentionally, but that's a pretty good sign if you see my shoulders up that you know I'm fairly stressed. So those are just some physical symptoms that I deal with, and those are some good physical ways that I monitor that. And then also know for yourselves what can you do to feel better. So I have a few things that I'm going to share. I encourage you all to do your own plan. I know that this is something that we did in the paper guidelines. So at some point, just doing your own plan can be very helpful. So I'm sharing some highlights from my personal plan. First of all, I stick to the motto, exposure only for the purpose of healing. And what this means is that I am going to only purposely expose myself to traumatic material if it is in the context of helping someone else. So I can sit through sessions of hearing horrific stories from clients because it's for the purpose of helping them and helping them to heal. When I worked on a rescue squad, I would go out and I would see the accidents and I would see the injuries because it was for the purpose of healing. However, I do not watch movies, TV shows, read books, anything else that is of a traumatic nature unless it's intentional. So I may read a textbook or on certain treatment techniques on treating trauma, and there may be some traumatic material in that, but again, that is very purposeful. So even last night when I was flipping through Netflix and figuring out what movies to watch, there were a few ones that seemed really interesting, and I just felt the voice of the Holy Spirit guide me to resist watching some of those that would have that additional exposure in them. And I think I watched My Big Fat Greek Wedding 2 instead. So I did watch that, and it was wonderful. And so no trauma exposure there. Some other things that help me physically are hot water. I love taking baths, going in a swimming pool that's warm, swimming in the ocean, getting massages, using a heating pad. Heat can really help relax those muscles. Going for walks and that type of thing. Relationally, I love talking with friends and hanging out, listening to music. Fun activities like going to the beach or skiing or things like that. Spiritually, obviously praying and reading the Bible are so important for me, but also I love listening to Toby Mac's song "Hold On." That's something that really helps me get through some difficulties. Mentally, as I said, limiting the trauma exposure, even logging on the computer, it's so tempting to click on the news links, and I tend to read the captions just to know what's going on in the world, but I try very carefully not to click on the links, see the pictures, and have more details because I'm just already exposed to so much trauma material with my clients that I don't want to add any cumulative exposure there. Humor is also something that I find extremely helpful, so I try to use humor as much as possible. Um, Spatially, margin is something that is very important. Having margin in my schedule, having downtime, time to rest, prioritizing things, structure, organization, clean house, that's important to me. It helps me feel better. So these are all things that are on my plan that I know that I can do when, I call it the heat turning up, which basically means that that my SUDS levels may be increasing. These are things that I do to help get those numbers back down. So compassion fatigue and burnout are both occupational hazards in our profession, and there's a lot of details on those PowerPoints that I won't go over everything, but I just wanted to touch a bit on both of those two concepts for you. So the first one, compassion fatigue, this is basically experiencing post-traumatic stress disorder at a secondary exposure level. So you may have all the same symptoms of PTSD as somebody that was actually in a trauma or somebody that actually firsthand witnessed a trauma through this secondary exposure. So it's also termed secondary traumatic stress. Or compassion fatigue or vicarious traumatization. There's a lot of synonyms for this. So it's important to know that even with our indirect exposure that we can develop the same symptoms of PTSD. This may have a very sudden onset. Again, it can be cumulative, or it may come on quickly if there's something extremely overwhelming that you hear or are exposed to. But it often involves feelings of fear. And in addition with compassion fatigue, some people report losing their ability to have compassion and just kind of feeling numb and indifferent to people's pain. That can be another sign of compassion fatigue as well. Now, the flip side of this is compassion satisfaction. And the wonderful thing about our profession is that there is so much great reward in helping people heal. So that can be a mitigating factor as well. So burnout, on the other hand, has more to do with actual things that are going on at the workplace. So this is often a very gradual onset, and it's due more towards physical and emotional exhaustion. So it may be related to high caseload, work stress, other symptoms involving other factors involving a work setting, as opposed to compassion fatigue, which involves more of the fallout from the trauma exposure itself. So, and I did my research in my dissertation, and I found that one of the main protective factors in preventing compassion fatigue and burnout as well, but mostly compassion fatigue, was having the ability to maintain emotional separation at a proper distance. So we know that in order to do our job effectively, we need to connect with clients. We need to have emotional connection, which is empathy, right? That's where we grieve with those that grieve. We rejoice with those that rejoice. And so we do enter into their world and really experience some of their emotions to a degree. But our ability to maintain the proper balance of connecting close enough so that we can convey that empathy, but then also creating enough distance in our own mind so that we know that those traumas are not currently happening to ourselves, and so that we also have a life outside of our counseling offices. And so it's very important to have enough connection so that we're conveying empathy, but enough distance so that we're able to step away from our work as well. And that can be a really important factor in preventing compassion fatigue as well. So good self-awareness, good self-care, the ability to maintain proper distancing there, collaboration with colleagues, whether it's your supervisor, your cohort members, or other colleagues in the profession that can be very important in terms of mitigating some of those factors of compassion satisfaction as well. So we don't want to over identify with clients, but we also don't want to under identify, because then we won't be able to be empathetic as well. And this is an interesting quote that from Summers and Flanagan, that depersonalized counselors develop cynical attitude towards clients and cannot offer positive regard, neutrality, or perspective. So this is one of the problems that can happen when somebody has developed compassion fatigue, that they are not able to really connect in the way that we need to be present with our clients and be compassionate towards them. So it's very important that we have very, very good self-care, not only for our own benefit, but also for our clients. And being good role models to our clients as well is very helpful, because it's one thing for us to say the words that they need to have good self-care, but if we're not doing it ourselves, then we're really not helping them effectively either. So this is just an introduction to compassion fatigue, and I hope that you will take the time to look through the PowerPoints, because they have more information in terms of specific symptoms and the cost of caring and that type of thing. But I encourage you to, as you go through those PowerPoints, to then develop that self-care plan. And it's a lot easier to be preventative than it is to be reactive to already developing some of those symptoms. So I hope this has been helpful, and feel free to email me if you have any other questions. But I want to encourage you to take very good care of yourselves, because the work you do is important, and you're important, even apart from the work that you do. So remember to put on your own oxygen mask first before we help other people, and continue to assess yourself, how you're doing over the years that you do the amazing work of being a counselor. Blessings.